All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of our podcast, True Data Ops. I'm your host, Kent Graziano, the Data Warrior. Each episode, we try to bring you new and interesting guests, talk about what's happening in the world of data and data ops. Now, today, it's a very special episode. We're actually live in person. We're sitting next to each other in the same room. My guest, Neil Strange, who is the CEO and founder of the UK consultancy Datavault, and also the organizer of the UK Datavault user group. Now, we're actually live in Stowe, Vermont at the Snowflake Lodge, attending this year's Worldwide Datavault Consortium. And so that's why we had the opportunity to actually be here in person.
It's really good to be here. It's always a nice place to come every year. Acts as sort of the starting point for the next financial year and meet all the old friends and colleagues and get to know each other better.
Yeah, I think that this is the first time I've been back here in 4 years. Last time I was able to be here live was 2019, pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even sure, were you here that year?
I was.
So that's probably the last time I've seen you in person.
I've got 5 out of the last 7 years, so it's been well worth coming every year.
I think otherwise we've seen each other on Zoom about 1,000 times in the last.
Occasionally in London.
Occasionally in London, but I don't think I've been to London since then.
No.
It's been a while. So, Neil, obviously I know all about you and I gave you a little introduction, but if you would mind telling our audience a little bit about your background in data management and the kind of things you've been into.
Okay. I guess it goes back through my career, really, where I worked, who I worked for, the challenges that they had. And I've been in the industry for quite a while now, over 30 years. I'm told it doesn't look like I have, but I have. And I've seen sort of the growth of the industry since the early 80s. So back then, people were just about introducing new analytics capabilities. ERP came through with all the data management and process issues around that. But always in the background, there was the need for that data and analytics. And I think over time, things have got more and more mature. And where I worked was kind of at the forefront of this. So I started off with systems integrators, where management reporting was a critical aspect of the systems being built. And eventually then moved into Oracle and more on the data analytics side than on the process and ERP side. And then really progress from there. The more advanced you get in the career, the more you deal with senior management, the more their problems are not technology, they're more data and what the quality is behind it, even if they don't realise. So it's about convincing people that the data is the problem. So my career path has more or less drawn me along that line, and data's been a key part of it.
Yeah, and then how many years has it been now since you founded your Datavault consultancy?
Well, that's a long story. We started off as a company called Business Thinking.
Oh, that's right.
Back in 2003. And then we realised we were doing more and more Datavault projects, and we looked, and the name Datavault was free in the UK. So we chose it because we like to name ourselves after what we do. And that's been a big thing. People, they know when they come to us what they're getting, basically. So, but that's since 2017 we've been running as Datavault.
Ah, okay, good, yeah. So, what are you seeing these days in the data world? We talked a lot about that here at the conference this week. So, what do you think's the hot thing, and what do you think's just hype that we should kind of put to the side for a little bit?
Well, I see quite a few things on the move. I think a really exciting thing, although it's quite mundane, is the software that lands data, stages the data for you. So companies like Fivetran, Stitch, and so on coming through that more or less take all the pain away, because that's a really horrible thing to work on a manual coding basis. So they through a configuration just bring this data through that you need. That really accelerates the process of getting data ingested. So that area is quite mundane, as I said, but very, very important in terms of speeding things up. On top of that, though, DBT. I think DBT has finally broken the ETL market down, although it does the T bit of the LT. It breaks it down into a true engineer's tool. So you can see the working parts in there, you can modify it. It gets away from these sort of tools where you drag and drop a few shapes onto a screen and it generates the code for you in the background, and you've got no real control over it. DBT gives you that sort of fine control. That's quite important. And then the rise of the CI/CD and data pipeline stuff. So the ability to automate and deliver working code and to build in all the testing around that as well. Automation, I think it's very, very important.
Yeah. Now, over the last couple of years, there's been seemingly a spike in interest in the Datavault methodology itself. What's your take on all of that in your experience? Any root cause there that you can figure out? Why is this happening after 20 years? Right, we've been doing the Datavault stuff for 20 years, and now all of a sudden it's like it's become popular in the last couple of years.
I'll let my secret out there. I think the reason is Datavault's been there as an alternative for 20 years. Right. It just didn't answer what customers were looking for. So 20 years ago, Datavault's really good when you're integrating multiple data sources. You're working at scale, you're working in the cloud, it's sort of perfect for that environment. 20 years ago, people had on-premise software, relational databases, terabyte-sized systems to work with, even gigabyte-sized sometimes.
Yeah.
They just weren't looking for the sort of things that Datavault offers. Wind forward 20 years, we've got GDPR, data controls, we've got cloud, organizations with volumes of data they just don't know what to do with. And they're looking around for an architecture that sort of works, but that gives them the robust nature of auditing and integration. And Datavault pops out of the mix as, hey, that looks ideal, let's have a go with that.
Yeah, so the to a certain extent, with the technology that we had in the past, and I'll say the volume and lack of variety of data, the older methodologies worked okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So there wasn't any need to really take on like a new concept and redo the way you're modeling your data for analytics. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, there was that volume thing, because when Dan invented Datavault, it was because he was dealing with massive scale from lots and lots and lots of different sources. And so Datavault solved that problem for him in the unique, very large environment he was in that caused him to kind of invent Datavault. And I thought about that. Yeah, it's like from what he was doing in the 90s to what we were doing in the early 2000s, it actually was like orders of magnitude smaller. So you could afford to make some of the mistakes that people made, and it wasn't nearly as critical as it is now, because with so much data coming in so fast and the demands are constantly growing, we have to have an approach that is more flexible, more scalable, more fault tolerant.
That's it.
Yeah, is that? I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. I was kind of, because I saw the confluence of it with when I went to work for Snowflake, and Snowflake started getting bigger. I kept getting more and more calls about Datavault, and it was usually around, well, we're changing platforms, so we figured maybe it's time to examine our approach. But I think you may have gotten more to the fundamental of why were they even thinking they needed to examine their approach.
Yeah.
Right? Is because enough other things in the environment had changed that, okay, now it's become more critical that we find a better way.
I think you may have seen this as well, but the number of clients I go to where their response times for a request, can you add a column to a table, please? 1,000 hours work, 3 months work. Yeah. Or
not acceptable.
That's crazy. And we're turning that around in 2 hours, and we have time for coffee because we're waiting for approval to deploy usually. So yeah, it's pretty good.
So this is kind of the loaded leading question.
Here we go.
On Datavault, do you think that Datavault's really becoming a requirement as an architectural approach for organizations to be successful with their analytics these days?
Good question. Yes and no. I think it depends on what the needs are. So like I said earlier, if you've got a high integration requirement, you want the audit trail and so on, go down that route. If you're primarily auditing logs or analyzing logs, you don't need a Datavault.
Right.
Yeah. So I take great care actually when I work with clients not to just keep pushing Datavault at them. It's what do you got? What are you trying to do? And if it's a good match, then it's something worth evaluating. If it's not, you should be going down the sort of data and stream analytics route.
Okay.
Yeah. But when you've got the insights from your stream, where do you put them?
Right.
Yeah.
Where do you store the results?
That's right. So that could be the case for the Datavault at that point.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, this is the True Data Ops podcast. So we've got to ask, you mentioned CI/CD as one of the things that's happening. So how do you see the overlap or intersection? We were talking about set theory in the last session we were in between data ops and the Datavault 2.0 approach.
Well, I think the important thing is to be able to deliver as much automation as you can nowadays. Okay, so if the developers are able to develop things really fast, but they're waiting 2 months to get something into deployment, that's not good. Working code is important. Working code and deployed active use by the business. The more you can automate that, the better. If you're going to automate that, you need to be able to do the full development of testing, official release approvals, and everything. And if you analyze the workflow of a lot of these things, you find development one day, sitting in a queue waiting for approvals, 40 days. And then security needs its go.
How agile is that?
That's not very agile at all. So I think DataOps and all the rest of that's about collapsing that pipeline as much as you can achieve. And sometimes going for automated approval seeking, scheduling things, running the regression tests, providing evidence to the decision makers that things are safe to go. All that's very, very important. And there are so many moving parts in a data platform now that you've got to orchestrate them properly, not orchestrate in running them, but orchestrate and deploy. So DataOps is really helpful in that space, but also in orchestrating the live system as well.
Right. So we've got this methodology with Datavault 2.0 that has all these repeatable patterns and all of that, but we
pumping things out really fast.
Yes. Yeah. So now we've got a way to get it productionalized and also checking the quality. So automated regression testing, things like that. And that's one of the things that I think often gets confused is people think that, well, data ops is just DevOps for data, but there's a bit more to it than that, isn't there?
I still get clients saying, "Why are you doing testing? Why are you doing testing?" It's just data load. It's just data load, and then they have a complex load, and the tests flag up where it's gone wrong, and they say, "Oh, we see why you need tests down." So we didn't break something by deploying something new.
Yeah, and that's why I think testing and automation are both pillars in the 7 pillars of true data ops. There's a lot of things in there that we had a presentation from Helly the other day talking about data quality and the need for testing. And nowadays it's even more important. I think this goes along with your earlier comments about why people are adopting Datavault, because the scale and the rate of change and all of that. And her point was that, well, what are we doing with this data? And it's not just BI dashboards. It's not just Tableau dashboards or Power BI anymore. It's now, this is feeding machine learning in order to get to artificial intelligence. And if we're not making sure we've got good quality data, then what are we teaching the machine?
What's it learning? Exactly.
Right, what's it learning, right?
And then the business, and then machine can't always explain why it came up with the answer. So you're then looking at some recommendation coming out of a machine and people blindly acting on it. And you may have biases in there, you may have bad data steering the machine down the wrong way, and you end up with the business making quite disastrous decisions.
Right, yeah. And because
I have seen that as well.
Simply put, if you tell the machine 1 + 1 is 4.5, it doesn't know any different.
No.
So if you don't have any quality checks going on in that data stream, then the results and the recommendations coming out of that engine could be
data cleaning
quite wrong.
Isn't the thing that your data scientists should be doing.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, they should all be working off the same data set so you can compare their answers.
Yeah, a common data set, or so what was Doug just calling this, the data enrichment platform?
That's it.
Right. Yeah. We're calling it data enrichment platform. It's not just a data warehouse anymore. I mean, it still has all the characteristics of what we know and love, but it's being used for many, many different things than what we did in the past. So if you think about the true data ops stuff, what kind of things appeal to you and stood out to you looking at the pillars there?
The pillars, well, I mean, there are 7 pillars. they're all equally important for starters. So I went down there saying, which one of these could I actually shed from the project? And none of them really. Ones we particularly like are the automated testing and continuous deployment stuff. So it's very difficult to test a warehouse, very difficult to work on that, and you need a good testing framework to do that, to work on that. A testing framework leads itself really well to automation. So when we run our projects, the testing harness doesn't exist. It's actually generated on the fly by the CI/CD stuff, and then destroyed on the fly as and when we don't need it. And we flag up all these mocked up tables and checking that the rules and mapping will work, and take some of the testing also into live, so more smoke testing that doesn't destroy the data but sweeps in the background, checking that things are still okay in production as well. Quite important to do that.
So what kind of things do you look for when you're testing the data in your platform?
Well, data warehouse testing is very different from regular testing. So you get the non-data warehouse developers, should we call them. They're into testing screens and behavior of user interfaces and so forth, and then the logic behind the scenes. We're looking at pipelines. So data over here, data over there, it's gone through a pipe. There's some transformation that happens in the pipe. You're checking that transformation is correct. So it's largely things like reconciliations and checking that rules have been applied properly.
Which is,
but at volume.
Yeah.
You've got 1,000 pipes, you've got 1,000 tests to run.
Yeah, and you would have to have a lot of data engineers to do that manually.
Oh yeah.
Or at least people who could execute SQL scripts.
That's it.
Right? Yeah, so this is, what you're describing is, repeatable patterns really in testing, right? If there's 1,000 rows in the source, there better be 1,000 rows in the target, unless we had some rule that said filter some rows out.
That's right.
Right, and so you can, it's, as we say, just with Datavault, it's eminently automatable.
That's it.
And then the question is, are people doing that? And even Ellie said, yeah, it's surprising how many organizations still aren't doing any sort of regular testing, for either from a data quality perspective or like a data pipeline perspective, right? To see, are my pipelines working? Because that's a big question. I mean, we always had that worry before when we called it ETL, and we had ETL tools. And if the process fell over in the middle of the night, the data warehouse didn't get refreshed. But if you didn't have anything checking that, you might not know until people came in the next morning and you get the calls like, why is yesterday's data not in my report? And then you go, uh-oh.
Well, I've had clients that have loaded test data from a source system.
Loaded test data from a source system?
Yes.
Into the production warehouse?
Into the production warehouse. And they didn't spot it for 2 or 3 months.
2 or 3 months?
They also have mystery shopper information coming in. Yeah, so why they got this really top customer that keeps coming in and buying stuff. And they flagged them out as a gold customer. And you said, well, why are they so far ahead of all the others? And it turned out that was the mystery shopper.
Oh, wow.
So, you've got to be aware of what you're looking at.
Right. So that's, again, and this is back to understanding the business, right?
That's right.
And what the business rules are and what we're trying to do here with the software. Wow. That's interesting. So if we look at, our triangle there, people, processes, and technology, what do you think is the biggest barrier to success?
I think everyone knows the answer to this. Well, technology is never a problem. Process is agile, sort of Scrum-like, so that's been around for quite a while. We can argue probably for hours about whether people are doing it properly, but they're trying. It's the people aspects. And there are 2 main killers there. One is the skill of the BI team. So you need certain specific skills to build a good warehouse, and they seem to be sadly lacking out there. It's very difficult to find good data engineers. It's sad in a way because the skills you need to learn can be picked up in just a few months. But people seem to have, through their careers, they've been focused on a particular tool. So they know this tool, but not the theory behind it and why things are the way they are. So that sort of thing needs to be addressed, because a lot of our clients feel that's a barrier to starting on work, or they start with a team like that and make lots of mistakes.
Yeah, so it's not a training issue, it's an education issue.
It's an education issue. Bright people in the team, they just haven't been used to working that way. And then the second area is really the politics in an organisation. Think about it. Data warehouses are the source of metrics. Metrics are the source of power. Yeah. So if you've got a new system coming in that's going to report metrics, there's a lot of business people who are going to be interested in what's going on and protecting their particular turf, or wanting to make sure that their measures on which they're bonused aren't being changed around. So you get this medal interference checking going on and disputes. So you become a football in the organisation, really, and you've been kicked around from one team to the other. So it's often that causes a problem, not anything else.
Yeah, and that really is pretty much directly related to the culture of the organization as to whether or not you are, if you're punished or you're rewarded. I know when we started doing Agile, one of the things that was hard to get across to people was the idea that it's okay to fail as long as you learn from it.
Yep.
And the old Agile phrase, fail fast, right? It's like, yeah, let's not spend months and months and months and months spinning our wheels doing something that really isn't working.
So many clients don't want to start a project until they're sure what the outcomes are going to be. But you can't. I mean, a warehouse is not a project. It's a process, it's a program that goes on and on and on. I always say to my clients, if the users stop asking for new metrics, then the business is dying. So, brush your resume up if the requirements dry out.
Yeah.
They've always got new questions, new insights that they need information on. So there's a never-ending stream of stuff coming through to the team.
Yeah.
And Datavault particularly sets yourself up for reuse of data and speedy response as long as the data's in there.
Yeah, exactly. So after talking about all this, do you think that it's really possible these days for organizations to deliver value from their data at scale if they're not adopting something like DataOps, Datavault, some sort of, I'll say, repeatable automated methodology like this?
It's always possible. But
this might cost a lot.
It is. Well, you tend to have bigger teams. It's highly complex. I'm sure you've been into organisations which have brilliant, smooth running BI. Behind that's a very frustrated, overworked BI manager who's got the hands on all the detail. It's QAing everything, and everything's beautifully aligned and organised. So all that energy is being put into organising the files and making sure they're named properly, things like that. And then that key person leaves, and another person comes in, and 2 months later the whole thing's fallen apart because they haven't been the same level of diligence.
Yeah.
Automation removes the need for that. It organises things for you and makes sure things are properly done and standards are applied. So you can then sort of raise the thinking and look at the value-added aspects of a project. So that's what I think.
And then it's a lot easier to absorb change.
That's it.
And if you suddenly get 10 new sources of data through mergers and acquisitions, something like that, it's a lot easier to get there, because I think that's part of it. Is, like you said, you might have the frustrated BI managers making everything look really smooth. It was like the current size of the organization, the current issues in the he can do it, but then something completely changes and throws it all.
Well, that's the problem. You see, they're so focused internally on how the BI team's working that they don't have time to go out and talk to users.
Yeah.
So what they need to do is
say, I'll leave that to
automation.
Executives
that's it.
Might be able to tell them, hey, there's a train coming.
That's it.
We're planning on acquiring 4 companies in the next 2 years.
That's it.
You need to be ready for that. Yeah.
They don't have time. They're too busy checking the files are named correctly.
Wow.
So but I think automation allows more teams to work to that level. That's the thing.
Right. But it also requires people changing their mindset on how they're thinking.
It's a mindset.
About what
It's a mindset change. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and adopting a new mindset. So the fun question I like to have people ask, we've been talking about all this Datavault stuff and DataOps, is what would you do if you weren't in the data world?
I think I'd probably be a teacher.
A teacher?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you are a teacher.
If you asked me when I was 6, I'd have said an astronaut.
An astronaut, yeah. But I said the same thing at 6.
I didn't get there, unfortunately. So, but yeah, I think I would probably be a teacher. As I like helping people understand things better.
So where can the listeners follow you and see what's happening in the UK and the Datavault world? And
Well, we have a number of things. I'm sure we'll provide connections after this and links, but we have a monthly user group meeting, which is late in the afternoon, so it's possible for the US to join on time zone differences. We have a user group community. We've got over 2,700 members for that worldwide.
Wow.
We have a user group website. We've got recordings of all our previous events. There's about 34 up there now. And
we should tell people this all started in a upstairs room at a pub in
upstairs
London.
room in a pub in London, a rainy night.
What year was that? That was
2018, I think.
2018,
first one,
yeah.
So
one of my first trips to London.
You came along, Dan came along to one, which is very well attended. But it's much better than a rainy night in a pub upstairs to be online across the world and people to see.
I mean, there's something to be said for being in a pub.
Well, I guess that's the case. But
with some fresh pints.
At the end of the events, we usually have an informal chat with anyone who remains online. So that's quite nice. But we do a monthly thing there. We have if you're interested in learning about Datavault, we run a 2-hour free training class every fortnight. That's designed
for US people. That's every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
You said
beg your pardon. We're just opening up in the US, so our US director will be also running a US version of that.
Oh, great.
Later in the day, so we can get the Pacific time in as well. That's well worth coming along to. We go into some depth about how Datavault works, and that will inform you enough to decide whether you like the method or not. We also have a forthcoming conference in September, 6th and 7th of September this year, in London, beautiful college in London University, very close to Heathrow. We're really excited about that. That's our inaugural conference, and we've got an exciting line of speakers coming up, and that went live this morning.
Good.
Please come and check that out if you're interested in traveling to the States.
So just far enough out there, we get our brains exploding at this conference this week, and we have time to recover through the summer, and then beginning of September, do it again.
That's right, we've got that. And if you go to our website, we have links. We have a whole page dedicated to describing what Datavault is and providing links
your
out to blogs.
Website URL?
That will be data-vault.com.
Data-vault.com.
That's right. Okay. We have links to blogs and so on, including a number of yours as good introductions to Datavault. And finally, if you go to the user group as well, we have a Q&A on there, sort of like a Stack Exchange. So register, it's free to use, and there's a big community there providing answers to questions. So there's a lot going on, lots of links, and it's a lot easier now than it was in 2017 to find stuff on the internet.
Yes.
And there's books as well being written, so that's a good thing.
Yep. Well, thanks for being my guest today.
Welcome.
Neil.
Very welcome.
Great that I'm glad we were able to do this in person after all these years. So we need to take a little time away from the event. We'll get back to that. Thanks for everybody else for joining us online. Be sure to join me again in 2 weeks. My guest is going to be Snowflake Data Superhero and Datavault Certified Practitioner, VP of Data Management for Eon Collective, Keith Belanger. And we'll have a very similar conversation around Datavault and automation with him. He's also an automation expert. So that should be a really exciting talk. And he and I will probably do a little bit of a retrospective on this particular conference because it'll be 2 weeks out in the future. So thanks everybody for joining. Be sure to like the replays and tell your friends about the True Data Ops podcast. Send them the links so that they can get registered and catch us on a regular basis. Until next time, Ken Graziano, the Data Warrior, Neil Strange.
Thank you.
Signing off for now. Bye.
Bye.